Hello and welcome to another anniversary episode of the Thom and Joe show. I am Tom.
He's Tom, he's Tom, he's Tom, he's Tom. I'm Joe, I'm Joe, I'm Joe, I'm Joe.
Hi,
Hi.
we're hello Joe. uh, Today we're talking about something very special indeed, aren't we, Joe? Uh,
Yes, something very special. Likely almost every single thing, if you have watched an animation, movie, TV, whatever, at least one of the animators has been strongly influenced or at least impressed by
yeah,
Akira.
we're talking about Akira, guys. We're talking about basically the anime that started this whole anime. I mean, it's fair to say, Joe, I think without Akira, we probably would not be sitting here talking about anime every so often, and I don't think anime would be as popular in the West, and multiple really famous science fiction films wouldn't exist that obviously have grown up in Akira's shadow, and yeah, the entire media market of like 2023 would be radically different. Yeah, we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing today. Um, Yeah, there you go. Akira basically, I think it's fair to say, single-handedly kickstarted anime in the West. I don't, yeah.
Yeah, and which is, interesting because I don't think it was a success when it first came out because it cost so much and took so long.
No, absolutely. So we'll obviously get into the logistics of this. This was like basically so. Let's just go back a bit. Let's talk about what Akira actually is before we get into Akira, the anime, and its impact upon things. So Akira is a manga written by Kazuhiro Otomo, who is a Japanese manga artist. It's based upon his manga, which stretches to six very fat volumes. It's over 2,000 pages. It took him essentially 8 years to single-handedly draw this thing. It is probably one of the most spectacular single manga ever drawn. It literally probably pushed the medium ahead by like a decade. We're talking like something that basically won a Kodansha Manga Award, a Harvey Award, which is the biggest the biggest American comic book award, and 4 Eisner Awards, which is the other major American comic book award. We're talking something that is like not even heavyweight. It is probably, I would say, probably the most important manga of the 80s.
Uh, Nazca in the Valley of the Wind?
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
that.
but yeah, so we're talking basically something created by the other god of manga of that period,
Yeah, it is that
that level,
level.
and like Nausicaa, actually, ironically, you mentioned Nausicaa. They sort of both started before the production of the film. In the case of Nausicaa, obviously, Nausicaa was drawn essentially to drum up support, to drum up funds for the production of the film. Akira's production more came along because this was just ridiculously popular. Um, and both were obviously finished after the production of the film, and both were also directed by the writer of the manga because Otomo also directs the film. um,
Hmm.
how would we describe the setting of Akira, Joe?
Uh, Cyberpunk Neo
Yeah,
Tokyo after a
yeah.
nuclear
I mean,
explosion.
it's ironic to say because I think we are talking, you know, Neuromancer came out after Akira. I think we need to sort of to talk about this. Blade Runner, I think is starting within weeks of Akira starting. We are talking, this is in a,
Um, well, the
yeah, the
manga.
manga.
The Akira the
No,
film didn't come
no.
out until
Yeah,
1988, and Blade Runner
yeah.
came
So
out well before
Akira the
that.
manga starts on, according to this, December the 20th, 1982, which means I think it's a couple of months younger than Blade Runner, but we're talking like a degree of like months. Yeah, Blade Runner comes out June. Obviously, Blade Runner's just celebrated its 41st anniversary. You know, and Akira obviously has obviously just also celebrated its 40th anniversary. I mean, we're talking two just colossal works, but where we are essentially in on the ground floor of cyberpunk. You know, this is the medium at its absolute birth. Um,
Yeah, and before it got played like hacky sack, it was actually in the Criterion Collection in
yeah,
1993. It had a Laserdisc
yeah.
release.
I mean,
So
Laserdisc
it's
were responsible for
yeah,
making the film. So Akira is essentially a cyberpunk post-apocalyptic manga. Um, it starts. We basically get an introductory section, whereas in traditional Japanese fashion, Tokyo is basically destroyed by a pseudo nuclear apocalypse. I mean, we are talking. Otomo sort of grows up in the 1960s. You know, he is fully aware of obviously, you know, the aftermath of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He is at university at the point where you're getting a lot of left wing, agitation. You know, a lot of Akira is essentially taking his experience as a young man and sort of launching it in this case about 40 years into the future. You know, Akira is based in 2019. The titular Akira is this mysterious psychic child who has destroyed the original Tokyo. We jump forward from 1987 to 2019, which 4 years hence is kind of amusing. Um, and essentially in the with a looming Olympics coming up, because remember that when everyone started pointing at this and going, hang on a minute, the Olympics is happening next year. This is 2019. Oh God, we're literally arriving at the Akira plot line. So essentially it tells the story of two members of a motorcycle gang, Tetsushima and Kaneda, and I try to remember Kaneda's surname now. That's not good. Shotaro Kaneda, who is essentially our protagonist. Tetsuo eventually, over the manga, becomes our antagonist as he becomes essentially laden with psychic powers and essentially becomes our antagonist.
yeah, and it was very confusing to people when it first came out for a variety
Yep.
of reasons. One, a lot of people saw it on the Sci-Fi Channel when they had
Yeah.
it, like because we didn't get the video release or they couldn't rent it or whatever else, which was cut down
Oh
so
yeah.
much they had to like run commercials every 5 minutes, which also
No.
doesn't help because it is a dense
It is a
film.
very dense
It
film. Yeah.
is because it is squashing six
Yeah.
volumes of 2,000 pages into a 2 hour
Yeah,
movie.
it kind of does
Um,
and doesn't. The thing is, I have to sort of
yeah,
say about the way that Akira works is Akira, like Nausicaa, basically adapts up to a certain point and then goes, we've got to actually end this thing. Slap something on the end. Essentially,
uh, attach it to
yeah.
Buddhism,
Essentially,
sure.
the internet reviewer, Super Eye Patch Wolf, when he obviously talked about this because this is one of his favorite series, essentially said it is basically the first half of the first volume and the last half of the last volume sort of then sticky taped together to form this thing. And obviously you got to consider at this point, Otomo is about, I think by the point that the film comes out, Let me get the actual date. Yeah, so Otomo hasn't actually done like the last third of the manga. The last the lot basically the manga he is drawing by the time that he is actually making the film doesn't, basically you get, as with Nausicaa, you get this very abbreviated sort of timeline of chapters coming out. So essentially the last volume and a half doesn't get produced until the film's finished, basically. So you're dealing with this sort of an adaptation that's very faithful for really the basically um up until Tetsuo sort of ends up in, the hands of the military, and then it sort of basically jumps forward 4.5 volumes while sticking in stuff from like the volumes in between.
Yeah. So, um, and to a certain extent, the denseness helps the
Oh,
atmosphere
definitely. Yeah.
a lot at the beginning because, I mean, there are a lot of things in it. There's student protests, there's a tax
Yeah.
thing, there's, the gang stuff, the science stuff.
Yeah.
I, it's sprawling and it's dense and it's almost suffocating and it helps the
Oh,
atmosphere
completely. No, I
because
would. Yeah.
there is very little
Yeah.
rest and respite for these people. I mean,
Mm.
they hang out like
Mm.
teenagers, and in a
Yeah.
couple scenes, but then it's just like, oh, Tetsuo took the bike, and now the gang that we were fighting with also going after them,
Yeah,
and
the thing is, for example, let's just take like one of the elements. So about 3/4 of the way through the film, there is a military coup, which is basically co-opted, basically started by the colonel, who's a character I will get to. Is one of my favorite characters in this because he's just this great, great military, the one-note military guy, basically taken to the nth degree. That military coup sequence and basically the build up to it is about half a volume of manga. And Akira's volumes are, if anyone has ever seen them, they're about 400 pages thick. We're talking about something like the thickness of an old school telephone directory. Yeah, this is about 200 pages worth of manga, basically boiled down to two sequences. This is the denseness that Akira sort of has in places. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, which we'll sort of get to when we obviously discuss the film in a little bit more detail shortly. But there's like characters in this who are like when basically the manga gets beyond what it does in the film. These are really major characters. Mm.
mm-hmm. And also by helping the atmosphere, it's just like
Yeah.
there's just so much
Oh
stuff
yeah.
going on. Like, you know, Canada goes to college, and it's just this wreck of
Yeah.
a place, and it's by adults who are just
Apathetic. Completely. Yeah.
apathetic, and then just corporal punishment. There's just this scene where the gym teacher just smacks them all,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and around then they get pulled in by the police, and also there's the gang fight, and it's all a product of this city that is barely holding on, and it goes to even the government, where this council is standing around, and because of the last mayor's tax cuts, I'm guessing for the wealthy, or tax businesses, that they don't have money for anything, and it's as everything is connected to everything, that's how we get this chain of events that leads to the climax.
Yeah, so I guess we'll sort of return a little bit to the basically, yeah. July the 16th, 1988. This actually differs between the manga and the anime. Again, it's one of the points the anime does change. I assume to match up with the release date because hello, we're releasing this on the 35th anniversary. Happy 35th, Akira. Yeah, so they basically Tokyo gets destroyed by the mysterious Akira. There's a world war because it's It's an anime. It's this is before.
Yeah, well, everybody, I believe everybody assumes that this was a
Yeah.
nuclear attack by somebody, and then everybody points fingers at everybody, and everybody
Yep,
starts shooting.
that's. I mean, Akira. I mean, Evangelion has a world war in between like Third Impact when just everybody just starts nuking each other. That's not really very much. Yeah. So essentially, we jump forward to 2019. Tokyo is rebuilt. The introductory shot of Tokyo Bay, by the way, is just brilliant. Because there's this sort of recurring
Mm-hmm.
theme throughout of Akira of organisms of amoeba. Obviously the finale sort of basically returns to that in spectacular and really quite gory fashion. Um, and the introductory
Mm-hmm.
shot of Tokyo makes it look like an amoeba. It's like this is an organism growing
Yeah.
beyond without this is an organism growing outside of its means now into the into what was left of Tokyo Bay. Um, we're quite. I mean, I've got to say here, like the animation for this is like I don't think there's anything in modern anime that rivals this. You know, Gib Ghibli
Um,
get to certain. The only film I can say really of the same-ish period that's rivaling this is something like Angel's Egg, I think, which does very different things
yeah.
with it, and again, has a massive budget thrown at it, and a very very
Mm-hmm.
talented production team.
It's it's the bubble
Yeah,
economy. Like there are things you will never see again in the
yeah,
bubble economy, and maybe during the anime gold rush where you got
yeah,
Texanalize, which was a very expensive series that nobody watched,
yeah.
and they're never going to do
Oh,
something like that
completely.
again.
No.
The same people were trying to make
Yeah.
Despera, which is something based on Dadaist
Mm.
poetry, or at least the
Yeah.
title is, and they've been trying to get funding for, I want to say, the better part of nearly 20 years, and it still
Yeah.
hasn't
I
come
mean,
about.
we're really talking about we're talking about basically. I mean, this is beyond what Ghibli, even at their most magisterial, is capable of. This is
Yeah.
unparalleled. The only thing I think that rivals this in terms of, I guess, modern stuff, the more stuff made in the last sort of 10, 15 years, is really what Mamoru Hosoda's doing, and that you got to consider what Hosoda and Shinkai are doing is massively, massively now computer based. This is Akira is made at a
Yeah.
point where computers are starting to come in, but most of the stuff done on computer is basically computer is already computer generated images, so like no technical readouts. As there's an
Hmm.
occasional thing. The majority of Akira is hand drawn, and that shows in the
Yeah.
budget. Um,
Uh-huh. And they had to invent
yeah, there was
colors,
like yeah,
quote unquote. Like
yeah,
there's stuff you hadn't seen in
mm,
this film, literally colors you hadn't seen in an animated
mm,
film or any
yeah,
animated film until this came out.
hmm
It I like like I said, the bubble
yeah,
economy, there are a variety of films, but there are three that come to mind. One is
yeah,
Angel's Egg. The second is Wings of
yeah.
Oniamis, which
Again,
launched
yep.
Gainax,
We talked about it.
and then
Yeah, exactly.
Akira.
I mean, obviously we get Ghost in the Shell, but you got to consider Ghost in the Shell is 7 years down the line. It is a lot more. It has a
Yeah.
lot more computer generated. You've got probably the best studio in the world behind them at that point, which is Production IG. This is you've got to consider at the point where they are making. Akira is essentially the last true masterpiece of the entirely hand-drawn era. It's because by the sort of the turn of the next decade, you're starting to get computers aiding in the drawing process. So this
Hmm.
stands now as the
Uh,
second. Oh, sorry.
just a side note, there is one computer generated image, and that is just Tetsuo's power level, or
Yeah,
that
yeah,
little circle that's a
mm,
power level. That
yeah,
is what the
yeah,
computers could do, and that's
yeah,
about it. Unless you're looking at the opening credits to Go Go 13
yeah,
Professional, or the
yeah,
helicopter sequence, where I mean, it was just like a skeleton can open it and close its
Mm.
mouth, and it doesn't look
Yeah.
very realistic. It's not very
Yeah.
smooth,
I mean,
and
yeah.
that's kind of where it
To
was
give you
at this
some idea,
point.
you know, Western animation at this point, Western computer generated animation is like Pixar's Tin Toy. We're, you know, at this point again, we're nearly 7 years away from Toy Story. Computer generated stuff is doesn't even figure in like the workflow for most animators at this point. It's an asset where they need it, you know, and it's basically to do stuff that simply cannot be done on Android. At the point that obviously it comes out, Akira has a tremendously large budget. I mean, I've seen figures of 700 million. I've seen figures, frankly, taking it up to a jaw-dropping 11 billion yen. I mean, the budget of this is sort of, you know, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
It is just, it's insane. It's like there is no, you know,
Yeah.
they basically so the production team for this is basically a who's who of you know, major companies at this point. So you got Kodansha, obviously the manga is published through, two Japanese broadcasters, Bandai, who obviously need no introduction, a Japanese advertising company called Hakuhodo, uh, Toho. So we're basically getting the two big animation studios in major anime doing this. The Laserdisc Corporation. Yeah, because this is like obviously, you know, the point that, like, this is the point where, like, you know, to give us this is impact. This is like Sony's DVD sort of production team sponsoring a film, and something called a major Japanese um stockbroker just like throwing money at this film. You know, this is just, you know, as I said, this comes basically at the end of basically the Japanese decade where you know, the country is starting to become prosperous. You know, we'll get into when we get into the 90s, obviously the lost decade. This is basically as good as it gets for the for Japanese, you know, home production, I think it's fair to say. Mm.
Mm-hmm. And um, oh, what was I going to say? Well, everybody who would become a director of anime in the 90s and the
Mm.
2000s either has a credit working
Mm.
on
Mm.
this or a credit working on Neon Genesis
Yeah.
Evangelion. Like they're in betweeners, key animators,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
everybody
completely.
worked
You
on
know,
this.
Gainax worked on this. Yeah, Gainax are credited as a one of the studios that basically stuff got outsourced to. Um, yeah, this is basically as big as, I mean, this is just gets big as big as it gets. Like, you know, this thing. Even before we get into the legacy of this thing, you know, this is a big production. This is basically the only production that I believe has a larger budget for this is Princess Mononoke, which is, you know, nearly a decade later, and you know, Studio Ghibli at their most magisterial. You know, it is again a film where basically money gets thrown at the screen to basically make the biggest, most impressive film of the decade. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, so
let's actually get to the
we got to
we've got
get
to get
into
to
the
the plot of
film.
this thing. So it's 2019. Do you remember where you were in 2019? Probably.
Um, I don't know where. I was probably in abject fear of
Mm,
everything.
probably making at least one. Hey, it's 2019. Time to dress like in Blade Runner. So yeah, it's 2019. You know, Neo Tokyo is just a den of iniquity. The government are corrupt. There are terrorists everywhere, and there gang violence, and including in this gang violence are some motorcycle gangs.
And in this, we have uh, Canada and Tetsuo. Did I lose
No,
you?
I'm here. I'm here, Mister. That's Mister Canada to you, punk.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to get that in.
Kanada!
Missed.
Okay, I just didn't know if you had cut off
I
for
am
a
here. No,
second.
so yeah, so
Sorry.
Kaneda and Tetsuo. The film later sort of goes into their backstory. The manga obviously goes far, far, far more into their backstory. They're childhood friends. Kaneda is sort of protective of Tetsuo to a degree, and is your typical hot-headed seinen protagonist, and he's in charge of his motorcycle gang. Because this is like, again, this is the era where sort of Japanese motorcycle gangs were like massively popular. Um, and you had the Bosazuku, which basically is the running out of control tribe. This is where you get all the really cool custom bikes. And talking about really cool custom bikes, the
Uh,
greatest bike, the greatest vehicle
boy,
in anime,
yeah.
the greatest vehicle in anime.
As they like to say multiple times, this thing has ceramic
Yeah, don't know
coils.
what that is. People have built this thing in like real life, and every single
Oh
time
yeah.
it just continues to amaze me. Canada's outfit is just fucking iconic. I mean, there's like a few elements of Akira, and just every Canada is just a character is just iconic. The
Bad for
bad for
education.
education, good for health. Um, Fun fact:
Yeah.
a cancer charity I work with have co-opted this "Hello Beat Cancer." I'll put a link down below. Really good people, loud electronic music, the sort of typical sort of thing that probably would, really build it, that matches the aesthetic of Akira. Anyway, our motorcycle gang are involved with another motorcycle gang, the Clowns, who again are massively more important in the manga. Um, and they inevitably crash into an Esper, one of these psychic, small, creepy children, who has escaped from the government.
Yeah, they have this long extended uh,
Mm.
fight sequence, which is extremely
Mm.
impressive, and let you know this is we are in new
Yeah,
territory. You have seen nothing like this, and you might not see anything
yeah.
like it again. I mean, people are gonna
Oh God,
try,
yeah,
absolutely, but it's like
yeah.
there. It's like so dense, so
Mm.
colorful, and everything is so fluid down to the minute
The thing that,
details.
yeah, the
And they
oh,
have little flourishes like the persistence of
mm.
vision on the bikes where the
Oh
lights,
God, man.
shift where they're
the
going.
the the bike animation in Akira. So the thing is with Akira's huge budget. I mean, we've got to talk about the budget again. Basically, the thing that I think is underplayed about Akira is how alive the world feels. There is no such thing in Akira as a static shot. There is constant movement in the there is constantly something moving in the shot. The bike chase is done, which obviously you go from basically our protagonist. So we go from Canada and one of his henchmen sort of keying in music in, I think, and you get this beautiful animation of just like the CD jukebox bringing the CD down. I mean, it's like the detail in this is just ridiculous, and then most people would just cut away at this point, and it's like, no, we're gonna have the really cool you know lever mechanism to put the CD down, and the music's gonna play, and then it just like it almost the way it sort of just goes straight into action is just you know there is nothing to compare to that introductory bike chase, which is just like pure adrenaline, pure aesthetic. And it's also where we get the score by Yuichi Yamashiro, which is just this propulsive, tribal, almost sort of quasi-tribal sort of thing with, gamelans, gamelans and sort of electronics mixed together in this really potent and mix that again. There is no score in any other anime like this.
Hmm. And I should note that uh, Shoji Yamash. I'm gonna get
Shoji
a lot of
Yamashiro, yeah.
Yamashiro. He is a agricultural scientist, and he founded the group uh, Geno Yamash
Yeah.
Shirogumi, which is a group of amateur
Hmm.
musicians who are performing old no musician traditional stuff, and they're adding a whole
Yeah.
lot of prog stuff and electronic
Yeah.
stuff to this. They are putting synths to this, and so it
Yeah.
is unlike anything you
Yeah.
have ever heard.
We've
On
got to
top
also point out,
top
yeah,
of it,
Gaino. We've
and
also got to point out that Gaino Yamashiro Gumi is like hundreds of amateur musicians. This is like there are basically. I don't know how obviously how the collective sort of works, but it's almost like a commune of musicians, and they have been hundreds of musicians in this group. Yeah.
so and you actually get to hear
Yeah.
that because they are. It's a lot of heavy percussion, and it's a lot of uh, di-
Mm.
discordant choral, or just uh,
Mm.
to put a non-scientific term, just weird, because like when we were introduced to the clown gang, there's just this breathing. It's like,
Yeah, but
and
it's effective.
it just adds to like
Yeah.
it's effective because you have it adds to the this is unlike anything you have ever seen. This is
Yeah.
Akira. There's never going to be like anything like this again before
No.
or again. And I've said
But
it
it
before,
bears
but it's just
repeating. I
like
was just...
it is underlying that in red ink.
there's a lot.
It might be red
There's a
paint
lot
at
of
this
red. There's a
point.
lot of red in Akira. So yeah. We basically get a really cool chicken thing between the leader of the clowns and Canada at like hundreds of miles an hour, and then we get the fucking bike slide. The bike slide.
The bike slide that has been used in everything.
Everything. We're not kidding.
Everything.
Yeah, there's just like
It's
it's
like the small lists.
yeah.
Uh, there is a list on the trivia in IMDb. It's like been used in Batman the
Yeah,
animated series.
yeah. You could sort of see a sort of it's like a cross section of Western animated series, Japanese animated series, and even some live action stuff. I mean, it's you know somebody did this in Nope, which indicates Jordan Peele really
Yeah.
really is a complete anime nerd because we mentioned him twice in 2 episodes.
Yeah, he Jordan Peele is a
Yeah.
secret nerd because he
Mm.
like he'll just throw out stuff like
Mm.
in
Yeah.
Us. He'll just throw in Chud, which is a very obscure, not very well
Yeah.
reviewed
Yeah.
80s horror movie.
Which is which is itself a remake of, I think it's one of some H.G. Wells thing. So yeah, we get the bike slide. Everyone cheers and goes, "Hey, that's the bike slide." And
Yes.
meanwhile, Tetsuo collides with a psychic child and gets taken in by the military.
Yeah, and as is accurate of 2019,
Mm.
wherever, that there's the kid escaping with the adult who
Mm.
helps them, and then the police come upon them, and
Bruce.
uh, they just start shooting, and then then one of the cops yells out, "Hey, he has a kid with him! Stop shooting!"
Yeah, the kid runs away. Sure, shooting him again. Yeah, what I will say, and obviously, violence in anime at this point wasn't unusual. The detail and the gore and Otomo has never been a mangaka to particularly pull his punches. Akira is a very violent and very dark and very body count heavy manga. The film does not pull its punches either.
No, I mean to a certain point it gets excessive, but
Yeah.
we can get there. Uh,
And the
so
people are
so yeah,
revolting in the back.
people literally
Yeah.
explode at
Mhm.
times in full gory detail,
Nope.
and this was during the OVA era, so yes, it wasn't unheard of, but most of the time it wouldn't be a theatrically
Yeah.
released film. It would be
No.
a
Grubby little video scored.
disc, like a laser disc or a video
Yeah.
release of for
Yeah.
40 minutes of something like
Yeah.
Violence Jack or
Yeah. I mean, certainly, again, with the whole, you know, boom of the 80s, a lot of you can do stuff like this. You have enough of a home market that a little company like, say, for example, Gainax can go, hey, we're going to release this new series on 3 VHSs, and it will be called Gunbuster, and we'll make an awful lot of money out of it. The market can support it, and Akira is essentially, the canary in the coal mine, going, the anime industry is doing really well up until it doesn't anymore. So yeah, Tetsuro is captured by the Japan JSDF forces, led by Colonel Shikishima, who is, I think, one of my favorite designs by Otomo. There's just a presence to the colonel, and having this sort of
Yeah.
this tough military guy in amongst basically a cast that otherwise comprised of lick spittle sort of um, yes men in the government, snotty nosed kids in the rest of the cast, and these sort of weird psychic preschoolers. Sort of, he
Yeah.
basically is the voice, or I guess the voice of calm in the series. He he does feel like our viewpoint.
Well, well, there. The other one who looks kind of like him is
Yeah,
Ryu, who is the mentor
yeah,
for the
mm,
female lead, which
yep,
we'll get to.
yep,
But so they look
yeah,
alike, and Atomos do look alike, but there's
mm,
like enough layers
yeah,
in like characters. Like there's a reason for this. Like the kids look like the kids, the teenagers look like the teenagers,
yeah,
and the adults kind of have. And there's enough
yeah,
differentiating them that his similar designs don't
yeah,
me- mess
yeah,
with each other. Like I did think like, oh, what's the military guy doing here when Ryu shows
mm.
up for on the other side of the plot? But that confusion didn't last long. Oh, he has like
Yeah,
hair.
absolutely. I mean, Otomo is one of like probably the preeminent sort of mangakars who don't really draw in what much like obviously Nako Urasawa. It's a very realistic, it's a very refined, it's a very detailed way of drawing characters, and you don't get Otomo never really stylizes in the same way that a lot of other manga artists do. He tends to draw, basically very realistic, um, and very detailed. And the fact that the film can capture the detail of Akira is, frankly, just admirable on its own.
hmm I mean, yeah, absolutely, it's
Mm,
not bad. It's just like
mm,
sometimes you definitely know when Otomo is
yeah.
involved with something or he's done the
Mm,
design of
mm.
something.
Yeah, because he has a style that is it is unmistakable. It's you could look at one of his drawings for Akira and go, yeah, that's Kazuhiro Otomo. He later did Steam Boy, which we might talk about at some point, but he's like the
Um, yeah, it's the worst movie I've ever seen. I'd like to see a
yeah.
sequel to.
We may talk about it at some point. It is a fascinating film.
I have already talked about it,
Yeah,
but it was in a
yeah,
podcast where my computer was constantly shutting
yeah.
down, and I had to check back in.
Yeah, and,
So,
and he obviously did
yeah.
Memories, which adapted 3 of his stories. But again, we're getting we're getting off topic. Yeah, so essentially, yeah, we basically, Canada and Tetsuo and is separated. We get sort of, and the military sort of go, hey, Tetsuo's got psychic abilities. Here's that sequence that Kanye West nicks entirely for Stronger, because he's a massive weeb as well.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
You ruined Daft Punk and
Yeah.
Akira, Kanye. Really? Well done.
Good
Good
job.
job. So, yeah.
So, yeah, and this is where we start getting like they cut a lot of
Mm.
stuff because there's like Tetsuo gets captured, and then there's his escape, which I we don't see
No,
much of,
he just
or
leaves
it's just
again.
like it seems extremely basic. He just leaves after they perform an operation on him to awaken his
Oh,
psychic
don't forget to
abilities, and we don't see the
Mm.
operation. I don't
No, as I said,
really.
he basically and they basically scan him. They go, oh, he's got powers that could like be comparable to Akira. Could he, could and Akira obviously is very much kept in the shadows. It's like, oh, Akira, you occasionally get like these slightly mad cultists who go, oh, Lord Akira is coming back. He's kept very mysterious for most of the film, which matches what happens in the manga because Akira doesn't appear in person until like I think volume 3, which is 1,000 plus pages in. But um, so yeah, this is where the pacing sort of like if you've been the pacing is not bad. This is the thing I need to emphasize it. The pacing isn't bad if you view Akira as solely a film. If you view it as an adaptation, you're instantly going, there are massive chunks of this missing.
Yeah. Um, you feel like you missed scenes, but you don't feel like you missed the
Mm,
information. I mean, there's definitely context you need to know, especially the
yeah.
student protests, and this is why when Akira was released in the
Mm,
mid '90s, a lot of people were confused
yeah.
about it because they were like, we don't. It was the '90s. We didn't care about like tax breaks for
No.
the rich or all of this government stuff that's unwinding on the people at the
No.
bottom. We didn't think
Yeah.
about that stuff. I mean, people think about it a whole lot right
Yeah.
now, but the '90s were just we
Mm.
were shielded from a lot
Yeah,
of
and
things,
it's sort of
and
partly why I feel you know you got to consider. So we'll get to the release of it later. But Akira sort of releases in the UK and sort of in America. I think it releases earlier in the UK than America. And you got to consider the UK has had like at this point nearly a decade of Thatcherism and has birthed things like 2008 Day and Judge Dredd. The which Akira plays fairly closely to that particular sensibility. Angry, disenfranchised people is what a lot of British working class guys who would go to a DVD rental store go, that looks cool, that cartoon looks cool. I'm gonna watch this evening while I have beer and curry with my mates. Oh, it's got tits and gore and violence. Oh, but look, they're they're basically just as down at heel as us. In I don't know, inner city London, etc. But if you when you take it to the United States, obviously there's a little bit of a disconnect because you've had a decade of Reaganism and everybody and everything being really okay, and obviously now you've you know by the time you get to the early
mhm.
90s, well, you defeated communism. It's like it doesn't
Yeah,
really ring in the same
we
way.
yeah, America just kind of swept things under the rug until the rug looked like a giant tower instead
Mm,
of a rug. And that's kind of to
mm,
explain what America in the
yeah,
90s was. I mean,
yeah,
it's uh it it feels I mean, I was a kid.
mm,
I didn't know what was
no, no,
happening, so but
but
it's interesting to go back and just like how much we
yeah.
didn't know and how much that came
Mm.
back to bite
Yeah,
us
and
in
you
the
can
ass
see it.
later.
We're not going to get into a long discussion, but you can see like even if you compare it to Ghost in the Shell, which was coming out by the time that obviously manga was releasing in the United States, 2-3 years later, Ghost in the Shell is sort of more chimes with that sort of 90s sensibility of going, oh, it's so much a struggle of us versus them. It's the interior versus the exterior, and far more a sense of you know this is no longer a war again of ideologies. This is a war of self identity. Mm.
Hmm.
And then obviously you see the co-opting of that in the Matrix and so on and so forth. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Uh, like we said, it
yeah,
inspired
everyone,
everyone.
yeah. So yeah, essentially, we are introduced at this point to our deuteragonist Kay, who is a member of this sort of resistance movement that is sort of the resistance movement in this is sort of like a little bit of a catch-all, as I said, because it doesn't really get the background that it does in the manga. They're sort of basically a catch-all group of terrorists who sort of appear and disappear when the plot needs them.
Mm-hmm. Like it is very
Mm,
confusing what they're about because like you get the feeling they're like communists, you get the feeling they're
yeah,
student protesters
yeah,
who are protesting, and there's just like a
mm,
whole sort of thing. But in action, they're just people who show up when
yeah.
the plot needs
Yeah.
a little
I mean, you
spice to
you
it.
can absolutely go, particularly with Japan, where Japan had like an armed faction of, extreme left wingers, who literally went around murdering people and eventually hold themselves up in a house outside Tokyo and basically started an armed war with the police. There is a lot of Otomo takes a lot of the politics of his use and puts it into a gear. I don't think any creator can live through a period like that and not you know at least relate to it in his work. But yeah, they I feel are one of the weakest elements because they basically you have the sort of the armed mob that later on become almost a faction into themselves. You have this Miko character who in the manga again is a much bigger figure. She is in fact like one of the major factions. Once Akira destroyed, so in the manga, I need to just very gently, very briefly say, in the manga, Akira essentially turns up mid volume 3. One of the psychic kids is killed. He then basically destroys much of Tokyo, and our group of heroes is essentially separated. And then Tetsuo rules over what's basically part of what's left is the Great Tokyo Empire, and one of the other factions is led by this Mako character who is in about 2 scenes of the film. That's the sort of the abbreviation that the film is having to do.
Yeah, and I will say at least it does a good job
Mm,
of what is important and what can be, kind of pushed to the
mm,
side. And, it's like a lot of it is, I don't want to say
mm.
mood piece, but a lot of it is
Oh,
atmosphere.
completely.
And it is just, and the student protesters or the terrorists or whatever you would
Mm.
like to call them just kind of are part of this boiling pot that is about to spill over and just spill over and wreck the entire
Completely, yeah.
kitchen.
And they basically, as I said, they represent, as I said, basically this sort of catch-all sort of faction because essentially they eventually end up being led by Tetsuo as sort of you know assuming he is this messianic figure. They're basically a motiveless sort of mob. And I feel the series sort of the film needs that sort of motiveless mob to sort of basically match the destruction that's going on the obviously on the between Tetsuo and other characters.
Mm-hmm. And also, it needs something to react to when
Mm,
Tetsuo becomes kind of
yep.
a god, and like it, he lets it known very soon what he thinks of the cults, quote unquote,
Not
supporting
very
him.
much. Yeah. So
No, he doesn't think,
yeah. So Canada meets
but it.
Kay, who is essentially Kay is a great character. She's fleshed out a little bit more in the manga, but I think the film does fine with her. She's basically, if Canada and Tetsuo are basically, they have nothing to particularly fight for apart from, the honor of their motorcycle gang, then Kay is sort of like the opposite. She's almost like a plethora of motivation because, she represents essentially the more nuanced sections of the resistance movement, and Canada gets her sort of out of the situation just before somebody decides to blow up the place. There's a lot of blowing up of things in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Meanwhile.
Well, and also,
Mm,
yeah, kind of a note on Canada. He is a kid who is, hormone
yeah.
chasing. So he gets
Mm,
her out of this holding they're in, because they're not, the motorcycle gang is not the people they
no.
are looking for.
Nope.
But so, and the police department is too full of criminals to do
Mm,
anything but get the people they are actually after. So they leave, he gets them to take Kay,
mm.
and then Kay immediately is onto him, and it's just like, yeah, I thank you, but I know you are chasing me because you're
Yeah.
attracted to me. And
Yeah.
even though he puts up this act, it's like, I have standards. I don't do this for just
Yeah.
anyone. And she just goes to a
Yeah.
whatever about
So
that.
we'll just go because we haven't actually mentioned. So there are two dubs of this. There's a dub obviously done way back in the 1980s. Like this is done like a year after the film comes out. So the first dub is done by Streamline Pictures. Who are
Yeah, they are one of the pioneers of
yeah.
anime in the
Yep.
West, like run by Carl
Yep.
Masek, and a lot of those other names you would know
Yeah.
that are known, even if you don't know who they are, like Fred
Mm.
Patton, and they are known kind of like, I can't remember what their British counterpart was, who did Dominion Tank Police, but um, or if that was Streamline and they just had British people,
Mhm.
but they were one of the people that were handed like projects
Yeah.
other people
Yeah.
wouldn't touch, uh, which fell to anime, and they would spice it up a whole lot with the language. They would make it like
Yeah.
in their way
Swearing.
of like filling out the lip flaps, swearing. They would add a whole bunch of flavor.
Mm.
Like, I think Angel Cop was
Yeah.
them. I don't remember 100%,
Yeah.
but Angel Cop is this infamous
Mm.
dub where they just, everything is a swear, everything's attitude,
Yeah.
everything is just this
Yeah, it basically
mash of
everything is just
obscenity.
punched up a lot. So yeah, they Streamline essentially did. They started off doing a lot of the Ghibli stuff. Ironically, in association with the Walt Disney Corporation under
Okay, it was Manga
Manga,
Entertainment. I don't.
which we'll get to
Uh,
later.
yeah, okay, but it was that attitude at the
Completely, yeah, and
time
it was
where they had to add flavor to everything, and it
mm,
wasn't 100% accurate,
mm,
but some people will go back and defend it because it was true to the character of all of these we don't give a shit kids
yeah,
who are in a gang and just
yeah,
j- all of that. But
mm.
also they were not prepared for how much the Japanese say each other's names.
Yeah, and so basically they started off as well. Essentially, they splintered off from the infamous Harmony Gold. A lot of actually the stuff was
Yeah.
actually partly released or licensed by Harmony Gold. I mean, some of the stuff. I mean, this basically what Streamline did reads as like a mixture of Hello everything Hayao Miyazaki has done up to like the mid '90s. Stuff you vaguely heard of, like obviously the two Lupin films, Doomed Megalopolis, and then just like stuff that I don't know if anybody is like would ever care about, like stuff like Lensman. Which is like uh,
Oh, there are people who care about Lensman. You get some older people, and
yeah,
that they want their Lensman
the
license.
secret of the lens. Yeah.
Just don't underestimate them,
Yep.
please. I haven't seen the film myself because it's been,
Yeah.
under a pile of
Oh,
licensing issues or
yeah,
whatever else.
completely. But yeah, so Canada is voiced in Japanese by Mitsuo Iwata, Iwata, who is basically just like a don of Japanese voice acting. He's been around forever. He was like 20 when he did this. This is like one of his first major roles. He has been in just so much stuff. He voices multiple characters. I'm trying to think of like a particular role that probably most Western audiences would talk about. But we are sort of getting towards Seiyu, who are probably in stuff that really is pre, um, anime being really really popular. In English for the original dub, he's voiced by Cam Clark, who is most famous for being Matthew Broderick's voice double. He does a lot of redubbing for Matthew Broderick, including The Lion King, which is probably where he is most famous for. And in the more recent dub that's done by animes who themselves are defunct, apparently, um,
Genion.
who are now part of
It would be
yeah,
Pioneer
Pioneer Genion.
Genion.
Yeah, the company who dubbed this again are defunct. This is 2001. I think there's been a subsequent dub since this, if I remember correctly. I can't remember who. who
All I know
yeah,
is the Streamline and the 2001 that was done by
yeah,
Genion
yeah.
Pioneer.
Where Canada is voiced by Johnny Young Bosch. Uh, yeah. Tetsuo in Japanese is voiced by Nozomi Sasaki, who is mostly famous for voicing the protagonist of Yu Yu Hakusho. So does a running trade in punks. Voiced in the original Kodansha dub by the original dub by Jan Robson, who again I'm trying to actually think. I think again is probably a little bit prior to uh, some of these characters, and in the more recent dub by Joshua Seth, who has essentially retired from voice acting, but is largely famous for voicing Tai in Digimon. And Kei is voiced in Japanese by Mami Koyama, who is again lots of voice. This is the thing when you get to this sort of age in voice acting, you're basically doing so much stuff that it's difficult to name a character. Lara Cody in the original dub, who is most famous for voicing Rosemary in Metal Gear Solid, and in the more recent English dub by Wendy Lee, because it's mid 2001 and Wendy Lee is in everything. Yeah, so the two dubs are great. I mean, do you have a particular preference for them? I feel like the Pioneer dub the Streamline dub does show its age in places.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen the Streamline one in
Mm.
forever.
It yeah.
I got the cheap Blu-ray with no
Mm.
special features and just the 2001
Mm.
dub and the
Yeah.
Japanese dub. So I've watched them
Yeah.
both in there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I just remember it from the Sci-Fi Channel where it's chopped up, like they're going to commercial break every 3 minutes,
Mm.
and like all of the scenes are kind of disconnected in a way, and I wasn't old enough to, parse out what the
Mm.
ending was doing. So my my memories aren't enough to make a judgment. I heard the 2001.
Yeah,
It's
it's
fine. It's
fine.
good. Like
The
there, and any of those videos that will pick out like choice 5-second clips that don't quite sound right because they're trying to
yeah.
fit the mouth
Mm.
flaps are just like that. That's cherry picking some real
Yeah.
uh, a lot of work, and it apparently was an
Mm.
expensive dub. The 2001 cost $1
Yeah, I mean
million
it is
to
basically a
produce.
who's. It is, to be fair, looking at like a who's who of like 2001 anime voicings. I'm not particularly surprised about it. Um, the only thing I'll say is the Kodansha Screamline dub is very difficult to get hold of these days unless you you go elsewhere for your anime thing, or you happen to get the.
There is
Oh,
a
okay.
limited version
Ah, okay.
edition Blu-ray of Akira that has the
Oh,
streamlined
okay.
dub in it. I didn't have that. I just got the one they put on sale for like
Yeah. Oh,
$6, and you could
completely.
get the 4K Ultra, and it just had the
Yeah, I mean,
2001.
Akira now, realistically, I mean, it should just be given to you if you when you become an anime fan. Just like it arrives to your door, your letterbox, and it's like you're an anime fan. Here, have a copy of Akira. I mean, it's just like you go into most like UK TV, DVD shops, like well, basically HMV in the UK now, and it's like Akira is like Akira is never above £3. I mean, come on, just go and buy a copy of Akira. Give one to everybody you know, and then they'll all have copies of Akira, and you can all talk about Akira. Where were we? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Tetsuo is in the secret government facility. Shikishima and his head of research, Dr. Onoshi, who is very much sort of like we can totally control Akira via this other angry child. Um, Shikishima basically consults the other espers, and in particular Kyoko is the one girl of the group, and goes who has premonitions of Tokyo being destroyed, but the government, being the government, goes, nah, that ain't gonna happen.
Sorry, I had to quietly let the cat out while you were talking because they snuck under the bed. Yeah, I know. But yeah, also
Mm.
budget cuts, and there goes into the last mayor's disastrous tax
Tax pri-
proposals that went
mm.
through,
No,
and all of that. And it's just all of that. They have to cut the
yeah,
funding for their, you, you know, play school of,
yeah.
psychics that have gone no practical
Mm.
results. So
Yeah, is a little bit.
so that's one thing that pushed
Yep.
it to the
Yeah.
edge.
Meanwhile, yeah, Canada, Tetsuo just escapes. He's just like he just leaves and steals Canada's bike with Kiri, who is his girlfriend. However, the clowns, who obviously for quite obvious reasons, given that like the capsules, which is Canada's gang, basically beat several of their members to seemingly quite severe injury, want revenge.
Yeah. And this is probably one of the most
Yep.
controversial scenes because they catch up to Tetsuo and Kaori, and then they just straight rip off Kaori's top, and then there's boobs.
Mm,
Those are like when they say there are boobs in this
that's the
movie.
moves.
That's
Yes.
that. It's
No.
not a very
Nope.
pleasant scene, and the older it gets, the more
Yeah.
it just seems like it's
Gratuitous. Yeah,
unnecessary
it's
shock.
it's Akira's one really gratuitous moment, and it's like, yeah, that's and then Carrie gets beaten up by the clowns as well. So yeah, it's like you're just
Yeah.
really really we're doing this, okay? And then Tetsuo proceeds to beat the shit
Yeah.
out of like the clown who tried to do that. And this is where his latent psychic
Uh,
abilities start to appear,
yes.
mostly in the form of horrible, horrible,
Uh,
horrible headaches.
mm-hmm. And he also has the dream of
Mm,
Akira and them playing, and then Tokyo just being
yeah,
exploded.
as one does with Tokyo. I mean, this is the thing, like
Yeah.
there's this thing. Obviously, we with a lot of anime, there is this sort of vicariousness to, hey, we can destroy Tokyo on our own terms this time, obviously. Um, but yeah, essentially, the Tetsuo is re-hospitalized by the military, um, and Canada basically comes across K's resistance cell and offers to assist them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's here that we start getting the really impressive sequences, like the
Mm-hmm.
sequence where it's never quite implied whether it's a dream or like it's actually happening, where the three espers basically terrorize Canada via Tetsuo via these really quite creepy dolls and toy car is like the detail on
Yeah,
that is
he
ridiculous.
he's he's placed back into the
Mm.
facility, and his abilities
Mm.
are developing at a
Yeah.
shocking speed. So much he destroys the
Mm.
room, and but they're uh, the psychic children hide in
Mm.
these toys. The most notable one is
Oh
the
god, the
teddy
teddy bear.
bear, and tries to get him to
Mm.
stay, and it does not work. And then he sees through their ruse and just completely wrecks
Mm.
their, psychic
Yeah.
vision or
Mm.
whatever it
Yeah.
is.
And there's this. Yeah.
Which is what the biggest one is when the giant teddy bear gets like becomes huge and
Yeah.
threatening, and then he just wrecks it, and it just shows it, falling apart in
Mm.
pieces in
But the
huge
yeah,
detail.
the animation, because obviously when they sort of form together, because obviously they are like these collection of objects. Like each of those is individually animated. It's like this is ridiculous. Every it's like it's like
Absolutely.
this is gonna sound like a really weird comparison. It's like the animation on the first Transformers film, where they have the budget to do it, and all these tiny little mechanical pieces in all of something like Optimus Prime's face, and you can like see these tiny little pieces moving about, you know, and it's sort of genuinely jaw dropping. The Tetsuro very quickly takes the fight to the other Espers and wreaks a trail of destruction after him. This sequence is again great. I do wonder, um, by the by, obviously talking about influence, if this like influenced the introduction to Elfen Lied, because it's like it's almost the same sequence basically, where Lucy breaks out and basically wreaks a trail of
Yeah.
destruction, down to really.
Um. Yeah, I wouldn't say it influenced the
No,
nudity in Elfen Lied,
no, but
but
the
certainly there is
carnage.
this, you know, the carnage, and it is the most high
Mm.
detail part of the series by
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
far. And so this is obviously what they wanted to make
Completely,
pop.
yeah.
Um and also maybe Elven
Mm.
Lied had a more sardonic sense of humor.
Mm.
I don't want to say it Akira doesn't have a
No.
sense of humor, but it to a certain point takes the violence seriously. Even the scene against Kaori, it is a terrible person doing terrible
Oh
things
yeah.
to someone. But it is, I think the thing where it gets mostly a sense of humor is just against the satellite we'll
Yeah.
get to, which it's just a
Yeah.
ridiculous, like ridiculously over the top moment, and the cultists who are now
Yeah.
worshiping Tetsuo as a
Yeah.
god, and he sees them
Yeah,
as
I would
ants.
say
So
Akira does have a sense of humor as a series, but it is a very gallows sense of humor. It's like
yeah,
it's the sort of dark, the same sort of slightly bleak sense of humor that inflects a lot of oh god, his name's just left my bloody head. The Devilman creator. Oh flipping hell, what's his flipping?
oh,
Go
go
Nagai. It's that sort
Nagai.
of same gallows Go Nagai sort of bleak sense of humor, where it's like there's a lot of you know, the world is ending, might as well have a party, and which is like particularly what Akira does become sort of in its second half. Obviously, once Tokyo is destroyed for the second time.
Yeah, but also it's not
No,
careless about it in the way
no,
Elfen Lied
absolutely,
is.
yeah, and it's like there is the tone of Akira is kind of fascinating because it would be so easy for Akira to be, a pretentious series, and it never feels pretentious. It feels portentous. It feels like it's got a sense of
Yeah,
gravity to it, but it never like. There's like some anime of the same period where it does, very much sort of disappear up its own posterior with just how over the top and how over the top it, it takes how
yeah.
serious.
Probably forgotten
Yeah.
we talked about Forgotten or
Yeah,
Megapolis or
forgot.
whatever
Oh,
that is. Doom
Doom Megapolis,
Megapolis.
which is
That one I would say falls into the
yeah,
pretentious
Doom
side.
Megapolis is a
And
fascinating
but
thing for what it's worth. It's this
yeah.
adaptation of this massive historical novel series, um, of which is this is one of the most important, most the only parts that's ever got made into a film, um, and yeah, it's a very it is bloatedly over the top. It's the sort of
Yes.
over the topness that unfortunately I feel inhabits X 1999 as well.
Yeah, which is one of my worst films of
Yeah,
all time. Maybe we'll get to it
maybe at
one
some
day.
point we wouldn't do.
You gotta pay me. Pay me. Patreon.com/slash The Thom and Joe Show. Tom
You'll
spelled
have to
with an H.
give
Give
us,
me
yeah.
money and we'll talk
We
about
might
it.
talk about it, and then I can talk about the manga and the fact that Clamp will never finish it. So yeah, as I said, there is a method to Akira's sense of the apocalyptic. It never feels like it is. It is it's going completely over the top. I think yeah.
No, it is feeling like it is the biggest
Mm,
enemy of the time, and it
hmm
knows it, and it wants to make you
Yeah,
feel like
so
it.
Tetsuo wreaks chaos, um, arrives at the room that control the nursery that basically inhabits the three espers inhabit, proceeds to wreck their shit. Um, Canada rocks up because obviously at this point Canada and the and Kay and the rest of the freedom fighting cell has sort of arrived in the building, and those two are basically stolen as this sort of flying platform, which is basically, and again, one of the more cyberpunkish elements of it, and terrorized the military with it. And Tetsuo basically just so powerful at this point that he realistically cannot be stopped.
And if I had a problem with this movie, it's kind of like everything after this gets blended
Mm.
together. So if I get things wrong,
Mm-hmm.
like when stuff
Yeah.
happens or not, like when they get to the
Yeah.
stadium, or
Yeah.
forgive me
Yeah.
because this is the second half
Mm.
is Tetsuo wrecks everybody for about 45 minutes and then
Yeah.
the ending.
The this I feel is where the the problems start with Akira as a film. This is where the first half of this is beautifully paced. There is an economy to it. It cuts the fat where it needs to. Tetsuo leaves the hospital and the pacing basically goes off a cliff. Um, Tetsuo basically Canada and Kay break out of the military facility in which they're being kept by Kyoko, who's one of obviously the female Esper, basically possessing Kay. I mean, there's this again. It's something that the manga goes into more, which is I'm gonna probably find myself next time I say that. Basically she uses her as a conduit. It's something that, again, that the manga goes into. She has latent psychic powers of her own. Um, Whilst that's happening, Shikishima started off his coup against the government and trying to stop Tetsuo with mere tanks. um, Tetsuro's basically kills one of the former capsule members, makes off with a hilarious amount of drugs, and mistaken by basically, and culminating in Tetsuo facing off against basically the entire Japanese military. This is all about
Hmm.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm.
and it. I also feel like we leave out a few characters. Like there's the
Mm.
professor who is the doctor, and this is kind of Otomo's weakness. Is sometimes he
Through
speaks
characters.
or his characters get
Yeah.
simplified. He, they're
Mm.
simplified to like their base sometimes. Like that there's the professor, and like I am who is trying to push science
Mm.
to its limits, and like I am Then there's the general who is like, I am a general, I am a soldier. This is what I do as a soldier, and this is literally a scene, and this is
Yeah,
dialogue
I
that we
must.
have,
I must.
and they are
But Tetsuo is growing out of our control. Commander, we must. I must do the military
yeah,
thing because I am the military man that does the military things. Next scene.
yes,
Men, we're going to the Olympics. Yeah, so Tetsuo goes up
yes,
against the Japanese military, wins. The Japanese military panic. Everybody in the vicinity goes, "You're God now." Tetsuo does not want to be God. Tetsuo wants to go and have a look at Akira, who's in the basement of the Olympic Stadium. Don't go looking for him. He's not there
surprise,
now. Nope.
no, but also surprise when he finds Akira. Akira is not
Akira is half the
alive.
man he used to be, or child he used to be. He's mostly body parts and
Uh,
jars.
yeah, because of course after he did what he did, which he what he got achieved transcendence. I is my translation. Um, but so they wasted no time in like hacking him apart and studying every little
Yeah,
piece of him.
which is a bit much for a small child,
Of
but
course,
okay.
yeah, and of course, Tetsuo is not happy
Nope.
about this. He has not been happy about anything for the past half an hour except killing people.
This is what happens when you don't when you have a massive headache and nothing will take away the massive headache. But
And also, you've been bullied.
yeah,
for most
this
of
is
your
where
life.
like again the manga sort of does a lot. Basically Tetsuo ends up as like king of a section of Tokyo, and basically wages war on other sections of Tokyo, and basically is building his own army. There is a sense. I appreciate that Tomo has to edit somewhere, but there's some section. Akira is ironically for the anime that started it all. I would kill for like a full adaptation of the entire thing. The scale is even more sweeping.
Yeah.
It's even more dramatic. It's even more ridiculous and jaw dropping in places. And yeah, I would love to see Akira get a full adaptation.
Yeah. The problem is, I don't think there's any company that would shell out the money for that, and I don't think there's any artist who would like, yeah, I can
No.
do that. I mean, they're colossal
Oh, yeah.
arrogance in some directors, but there's nobody. I wouldn't say there's nobody, but the's nobody you would give a whole
Yeah.
lot of money to that would be that
No,
arrogant.
it is. Yeah.
Although I'm gonna say that, and within a year they're going to give Gohan's
Oh, Jesus.
a Akira
Oh
adaptation.
God, not Gohan.
That's gonna get shut down halfway through.
Oh, he's-
And that's what's gonna happen. That after I said something out
We
loud,
stole-
and that's what's
They
going
stole
to
the
happen.
design. Yeah, it's just, basically Tetsuo is not best pleased by his discovery. Yeah, and by the way, Canada
And-
is not as, and at this point Canada and Kei turn up. Kei actually fights Tetsuo.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that
And somewhere in the mix, there are the terrorists who try to take advantage of us, and then the military breaks out their laser
Yep.
weapons.
It's like, oh yes, laser rifle.
Which are laser
Yeah,
rifles
it's
that
like,
are
you know,
extremely brutal.
There is like
and
an escalating sort of
they
sense
are-
of violence in Akira. It's like, tank doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Fine, laser weapons.
and it is a brutal weapon because you just see it like just separate body parts from people in the action, and then
But yeah, as I said,
Canada eventually gets one of
Seems to
these.
have lost Joe. Joe?
Hello? Yes, I'm here. Hello. Hello, do you
That's
get
Mr.
me?
Canada to you, punk. Yeah, sorry, where were we? Oh yes, laser weapons.
Laser weapon. So yeah, Canada eventually
Yep.
gets one, and that that is essentially the one trump card he has in fighting Canada. Besides, they were friends when
Mm.
they were
Yeah,
kids.
there is like the basically when Canada does come rock up to fight him, it is obviously you do get the Canada Tetsuo yelling at each other. That's Mr. Canada to you punk, but it's like the particularly the Japanese dub and in like the anime's dub, it's like, hey old buddy, old pal, how you been? I'm busy being horrendously powerful and psychic. How's things with you? Sorry about murdering your friend and wrecking and stealing your bike, and the trail of destruction I have wrought across the city in which we both live. How about we play a little bit of pickleball? Except I'm going to throw buildings at you.
Hmm. And I'm going to blast this laser, which can cut off
Please
your
don't do
arm.
that. Yeah, and
Oh, and I should notice in the military, there is like the scene that just kind of describes how overwhelmed they are. Is they get this satellite called
yep.
Sol, that is a laser weapon satellite, and it streams down upon them, and it just like it essentially blows up a
Hmm.
city block. But uh, at one point, it actually cuts off
Yep.
Tetsuo's arm. Um, but then once he realizes what it's doing, he brings up his psychic shield and then flies into space and then punches it and
And
destroys
then
it.
bits of it fall on Tokyo. That went well, guys. Well done.
Yeah.
And then he makes himself a new arm
Hmm.
because why wouldn't you make yourself a new arm if you were that powerful?
Hmm.
I mean, even the animation on the arm is
And
ridiculous. Just like he
yeah, it
basically you
is
can see all of the moving
especially
parts of this mechanical arm he
yeah,
has.
yeah, and this is kind of one of the more famous scenes too, because they're having a like cat and mouse chase in. Uh, they're having a cat and mouse chase at the Tokyo Stadium, and he's, you know, this is where they're shouting their names at each other, and oh, I need to recall Tom.
Right, I'm not sure what's going on, but
Okay, I don't know. The internet's just cutting in and out. I don't.
psychic arm time.
So psychic arm time, and they have the cat and mouse chase at the
Hmm.
stadium where Canada's on his motorcycle and he has the laser, and they're kind of trading blows, and then uh, Tetsuo starts to lose control of his own
Yeah,
body.
that and it's here that we get probably like the other really iconic and genuinely disturbing sequence of Akira because it's like the body horror elements of Akira I feel are like an underutilized and certainly an under appreciated section of the film because god damn that's creepy and amazing at the same time.
Yeah. And also, Kaori
Yep.
is there. I feel Kaori is kind of a
Yeah.
neglected character because she's the human side
Yep.
of Tetsuo. She's the one who really
Mm.
likes him for
Mm.
him, and kind of gets shoved into this mess, but then is just like used as a plot
Mm.
development in the end because he loses control of his body and his body starts to expand and become this like giant
Yep.
blob that is uh, risking it consuming everywhere, and uh, Kaori gets caught in it,
Yeah.
and it it kind of feels like she's only there for
Yeah,
metaphor
it does then go a little
purposes.
bit David Cronenberg and yeah, squick I think is the best word of using that. Like you ooh. It's impressively visceral, and there's so many, I feel like um there's a lot of animators that like took that sequence. I mean, it's been homaged. The sequence alone has been homaged by like several, famous Western properties. And it's like, yeah, if in doubt, break out the horrifying amoeba goo person.
The South
Yeah.
Park
Oh god.
motto.
Yeah. It's just it's very much, as I said, again lifted from the manga, again very well executed. The body horror stuff with Tetsuo does get really, obviously a lot more Cronenbergy, Shinya Tsukamoto, sort of the creator of Tetsuo the Bullet Man, sort of esque. Um, but I feel the sequence does really well because it's sort of, it almost, there's this sense that Tetsuo almost de-evolves back into, amoebas, because amoebas don't build things, they just destroy things. Mm.
Hmm. And that's the big uh, point at the
Mm.
end as Kay gets, kind of possessed and talks about if an amoeba suddenly involved into a human, could it control it?
Mm.
What would it do? And this is kind of going into what's happening to Tetsuo
Mm.
right now. Is he is evolved far beyond what he is
Mm.
capable of, and he has lost control of it, and it is turning into essentially this
Yeah.
blob of destruction. And then that leans into Akira, the dream sequence, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it, the sequence that kind of leads us to the conclusion, where everything is connected, past to
Yep.
present, uh, and it's, I mean, it's very
Yeah.
Buddhist. It is um, what I theorize happened to Akira, and there's probably the manga, but that will tell me the whole story. But it takes me at least a week to get something I reserved at the library to my library, and I
Mm.
can pick it up. So I haven't even gotten the first volume of
Yeah,
the manga yet. But
it's well worth the
um,
read.
what I interpret happened with Akira is he attained like the transcendence um, before he was supposed to, and that is what caused the
Mm.
nuclear
Mm.
explosion. And it is that this moment is just touching the uh, parts of Buddhism, like everything is connected, everything
Mm.
is you know to each other, and like all of how all of these layers have built up to this. And it's more Akira coming in and showing the warmth of that, like how Canada protected Tetsuo, and how all of these people, and that warmth is the thing that needs to be
Yeah.
strived for, but doesn't.
Mm.
And then kind of the movie ends from there. And that was the really confusing part, because we're 90s kids. We don't know what
No.
Buddhism is. We know what karma is through distorted Western
Yeah.
media versions of it, but we don't know what this means
Yeah.
as far as what's
Mhm.
going on.
So Otomo has this to say about the manga, because essentially he was aware of what he needed to do for the manga ending, and essentially what he basically did was edit down what he had for the manga backwards into the film. So obviously he I mean he enjoyed, he enjoyed making the film. He does, regard them as two different things. He does describe making the film before ending the manga as, quote, the worst possible idea. What is quite interesting, what I didn't realize before today, because obviously having, read a little bit around the thing, um, the ending of the manga was influenced by Alejandro Jodorowsky, the Franco-Chilean filmmaker and mystic, who essentially the guy directed Holy Mountain and attempted to direct June. Um, who sort of basically who he had a conversation with Otomo, and essentially apparently Akira's ending came out of that, which indicates how small a world it is. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
especially artist
yeah,
communities.
um, yeah. So as I said, I feel Akira ends on the right note. It is, you can only do so much in a 2-hour film. You know, it could have been, it could have been obviously tempting to, release Akira as OVAs, but I don't think we'd have had the the detail and the the pure visual thing of the whole the pure visual power of this film. You know, um, so
Mm-hmm.
obviously the film releases uh, on July the 16th, 1988. Sixth highest grossing film of the year. Um, just about makes back its budget. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then it comes, yeah,
Yeah, it has a hard uh, it's a hard time getting numbers just
yeah,
because it's the Japanese
yeah,
box office. Like internationally, it says it's only grossed like three
yeah, yeah.
million, but I imagine that's
Yeah, I mean there are
international.
no. I mean, we got like some Japanese, figures. I mean, the film. I mean, basically the film is described as doing moderately well, which is not the sort of words you expect, for basically a titanically important thing. So it releases obviously in the United States on Christmas Day, 1989. Grosses $1 million there. Great. Re-released in theaters obviously for in 2001 with obviously the second dub. Uh, and then it comes west, and it comes west. It comes to the UK. And it's here that the island of all people, Island Records, the decades, by this point, are already really really famous. They basically are the label for every other band you've heard of. Um, and this basically comes out as via they create a wing of their company, called Island Visual Arts, to make this thing, to release this thing in the West. This is still using obviously the laser disc, the Pioneer dub. It's the streamlined dub. It's fine. It comes out. And then it comes out on VHS. And Island Digital, Island sort of, obviously visual. Uh, Eventually comes a little company called Manga Entertainment, who you may just have heard of, and who are basically respond. So off the back of the cinematic release of Akira, Island basically under a guy called Chris Blackwell basically go, um, cool. We're gonna spin this off into its own thing. um, they basically, with the money, they start obviously, Manga Entertainment off. Manga Entertainment then goes on to be basically the becomes basically the first major distributor of anime in the West. Before this, it was basically
Mm-hmm.
piecemeal stuff, or it would be the subsidized part of a American of a wing. And it's kind of here that it sort of starts to take on its mythic quality. I mean, this obviously comes out on VHS in 1991. Basically, it becomes a runaway hit. This thing sells 60,000 copies in the UK alone, and 100,000 tapes in Europe, and 100,000 tapes in the United States. Which, considering this is like 1991 VHS, that's quite a lot of units to
Yeah,
push.
you didn't really
Yeah,
own VHS tapes, but that was mostly because of how they set it up. Only the most popular
yeah,
films got released on VHS. Otherwise, you had to
mm,
rent them. If you wanted to buy them from the
yeah,
distributors the rentals
yeah.
people got, you'd have to pay like
Yeah.
$150
Yeah.
per
See,
tape.
see, for example, the Disney Vault, where they went, yeah, do you want to pay 120 quid for VHS? Oh, you do? Oh. I think we might be all right here. So yeah, Manga Entertainment obviously launches in there. Manga Entertainment would go on to basically released like everything in the West. I mean, we basically are talking until the turn of the millennium and the second anime boom that sort of basically other companies start to make themselves known in the industry. Um, yeah, I don't think it can be underrated, like the impact of Akira.
Yeah, you can not like it because either it's too
Mm,
violent for your taste, or it's obviously a compacted story, or something like
yeah,
that. But you have to
you
respect it because everyone who would inspire you and you do like
yeah.
respects it.
God, I mean I mean, I'm just looking at the list of this. So I think it's fair to say. So it's ironic because we obviously we're not going to do an episode on the other major landmark of a major anime in the late 90s, in the late 80s and to late 90s, because Joe, you don't like Pokemon. And that is fair. That is fair.
No.
But I realistically think between the release of Akira in 1988 and the release of Pokemon, Pokemon the movie in 1990. Sorry, the release of Akira in 1988 and the release of Pokemon in 1998. The entire industry starts to basically emerge. I mean, we're looking, the impact without Akira, without any shadow of a doubt. You know, first off, Manga Entertainment basically gives you a bedrock. Here is now something you can release on VHS to go to either the consumer or to video rental. You it basically I would say it lays the grounds for three really major things. Number one, it lays the ground for Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell really, if anime hasn't already been, a major, a major force, Ghost in the Shell pushes it over the top, undeniably. Ghost in the Shell again
Mm-hmm.
released by Manga Entertainment. Manga Entertainment co-produced the film, and this indicates that in just you know 4 years how much power they now have in the industry. Number two, yeah, Akira's boom kind of basically causes a boom inside the anime industry, and you get a little series, which we are going to talk about in far, 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 far greater detail in December, which is Neon Genesis Evangelion. Evangelion, Dragon Ball, that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
launches on Toonami by realistically, the early 2000s. By the time you get the new sort of series, by the time you're getting, your Naruto's, your Bleaches, your One Piece, etc., and your Dragon Ball, you are basically in a receptive industry whereby, you know, people, most teenagers are aware of anime as a thing. Number three, Pokemon the movie. Pokemon the movie is basically the moment the dam breaks. If Akira and
Mm-hmm.
Evangelion and Ghost in the Shell have been hammering away with it, Pokemon goes, here is anime as basically the vanguard of probably the most, one of the most lucrative cultural properties of the last 25 years, and it just knocks the door down. And by that point, anime is, it it sort of started to sneak in to popular culture. I think at that point, I think it's fair to say. You're seeing anime influence
Yeah.
in, Western shows. You're seeing, anime influence elsewhere. I mean, but this is even without saying, hey, by the way, Scream, Michael Jackson, 1995, the most expensive music video of all time. Guess what's pride of center in that music video? It's bloody Akira. And
And
Zillion,
Zillion.
the series that nobody remembers.
Yeah, that thing that had a
Yeah,
Sega game.
Zillion. But I mean, Akira is the start of anime. This is you can go, oh, but this or that, or you can go, oh, but Astro Boy on American TV, or War of the Planets on American TV. Yeah, but Speed Racer.
Speed Racer is the
Yeah,
one my
yeah,
parents remember.
but these are basically, they almost form, I would say, for people of my generation, that sort of, the same argument that sort of, stuff like Pokemon does, which is like, it's anime, but we don't really think of it in anime in the same way. Akira is the event that launches anime. There is,
It could be called the Event
yeah,
Horizon that, sucked it in and
yeah,
broke everything
yeah,
apart,
completely,
and then, release whatever else on the other side of
yeah.
the black hole.
Yeah, and we're still living in that in that event horizon.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, Akira is a landmark. You
Absolutely.
you cannot, we could do, we could be sitting here for 4 hours talking about even.
Uh, I'm not going to be here to 4 hours because it's going to be mostly me piecing. So, did they knock out the satellite before he kills the protesters, or what? I
After,
don't
I
know.
think,
That's
yeah,
after. Yeah, yeah, it's that kind of like piecing together what
yeah.
exactly.
I mean, yeah.
Because I've watched it twice in 2 days. I watched the Japanese dub and I watched the English dub in
Mm,
2 days, and
mm,
I'm still. I mean, if there's the weakness, it's like the second
yeah,
half of the movie just
yeah,
gets, kind of swallowed up in its own carnage a little bit, and it's
yeah.
not until like when everybody connects to
Mm,
Akira that it kind of gets its clarity, and it gets its purpose. I mean, there's that line where they say about the
yeah,
amoeba, but
yeah.
you don't really feel, if it didn't end with that little
Mm,
thing, you
yeah.
wouldn't get it. You wouldn't
Mm,
feel it, and it would just be something they're trying to do that they
yeah.
don't do.
And the thing is, you can go, oh, Akira is a flawed adaptation. Oh, Akira's second half is, yeah, but it's like the whole package of the thing. The thing is an event. You can go, we can go, oh, but Citizen Kane, oh, the pacing's a little bit bad, and yeah, but it's Citizen fucking Kane. It's,
Hmm.
it is a moment in modern, not even just modern anime, not even modern, animation. It is a moment in modern cinema that is an immovable fixed point, that you can still see the reverberation and the shock waves from this thing 35 years later, in
Yeah.
basically animation and, science fiction and cinema in general. um
Although I will say, if you want a fun Citizen Kane,
yeah,
Casablanca, because Casablanca has so many great lines, so many wonderful things, and it still has like the
yeah,
importance around it.
completely, and
So,
and it's and
so
it
off topic, completely
and
off
it has
topic.
Nazis
Sorry.
being scared by the Marseillaise. What's not to like? And
Of
the
course.
funny sort of thing about Akira's legacy is the remake. The Americans keep trying to make even the live action Akira. They've been trying to make the live action Akira at this point for close to, well, actually over 2 decades. It's
Yeah, I have lost track of
yeah.
the
I
name
mean,
since the Hughes brothers were on
yeah.
board.
Leo
They
was
got some
Leo was on board
screenwriter.
at one point.
Leo was on board.
Yeah,
And it just never
yeah.
got anywhere because,
It's
like, when they initially tried it in the 90s, Sony
mm,
wanted to make it. It was going to cost $300 million in
yeah,
1990s money to make it. So they said no. And that number's gotten lower, but it's
yeah,
still not gotten low enough. It's
yeah,
still like 200 something
yeah.
million in
I,
today's
I,
money. And
yeah.
granted,
I
like
think it's unmakeable.
an Indiana Jones movie
Yeah,
costs
I,
that, but
I genuinely
yeah.
think it's unmakeable. I mean, it's. I think it is completely unmakeable, and frankly, as I said, you return to this, this idea of, this thing is an albatross round the entire science fiction cinematic industry. This is like remaking Star Wars. This is the sort of same cultural footprint that something like Star Wars has. And frankly, as I said, 35 years on, what's wrong with the original film still really holds up. You know,
Yeah. And I think it's a case of artists who really like it going up against executives
would like
who
money.
have no understanding of it. It's just a
Yeah.
name where they feel like they can get
Mm.
money out of it. And, once they crunch the numbers,
Nope.
they're like, nope,
Nope. Nope. No.
nope, nope, nope. And then they saw the grosses for the Speed Racer movie and are like, nope, nope, nope,
No.
nope.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And
It's
yeah, Battle Angel Alita has nothing to do
yeah.
with anything because it's a Robert Rodriguez thing he did,
Mm.
yeah, for reasonable, and it made a decent
Yeah.
amount of money. But that's if you're gonna adapt Akira, that's reasonable is not what
No.
you're looking for. You're looking for literal Titanic
Yeah.
numbers.
And Jim Cameron is too busy making actually more Battle Angel Elite at the moment, so he's not available. Um, yeah, I mean, we could sit here for like, hours and go on, and talk about the impact of Akira. I mean, this thing is immeasurably important. We would not
Yeah,
be talking
uh,
sitting. Well, we certainly wouldn't be sitting here talking about Akira because Akira wouldn't exist. But we would not be sitting here talking about anime without Akira. I think is fair to say.
run the bike slide
Why don't
gif.
do it now? Do it now. Men, we're going to the Olympics. Yeah. So yeah, that yeah, so we're gonna cut it here. I mean, we yeah, I love
Yeah.
this film. I have 3 copies of it. Because I
Mhm.
basically have picked up copies of Akira over the years. I need to buy the manga at some point. Frankly, it's it's a film I think everyone should see at least once, if only to go.
Yeah.
The problem is the one. This is my final really thought. The problem is with Akira is we're so used to being in its shadow. We're so used to seeing things influenced by it that to actually turn and look at it, these days, I feel it's sort of almost become so much like Evangelion in a way. It's sort of become and Ghost in the Shell. It's become so much part of the furniture that I don't think we really take
Mhm.
into account what how groundbreaking and singular
Yeah.
this film is.
I still like the first trivia on the IMDb, which says they had to make
Yeah,
colors for
yeah. It,
this.
it
That, like, okay, these colors didn't exist in
yeah.
animation at that point. So they had to
Mm.
make them for this film. This tells you, you know, groundbreaking, how this is like they were doing nothing that had been
Mm.
seen before,
Mm.
literally. In my mind, I have 2 copies of it, or I had 2 copies. I always pick up the cheap DVD slash Blu-ray that has no special features, but has the movie in full
Mhm.
definition of
Mhm.
whatever it is. So, but I think it's a 3.5-star film, but it's one of the important
Mm.
ones. Like there are 3.5-star films that are better
Yeah.
than the 4-star
Mm.
masterpieces where every
Yeah.
piece
Completely.
fits, because they are a complete burst of energy, and it's the experience, or it's
Mm.
like feeling that something's new and nobody's done this, and it's imperfect because nobody has
Yeah.
done
It's
this, and
yeah.
among
Among other
other
things.
things, I mean, among adapting a really
Yeah.
long work, but it is a burst of creative energy you are not going to forget, and that you are going to
God. Yeah.
respect, regardless of its flaws and what it does and
Mm.
doesn't do.
Definitely. Yes. I mean, we.
Oh, one final note for me. It occurs to me how many dead companies
Yeah.
surround
It's
this
like
thing. Um,
Manga Entertainment.
because Streamline, Manga Entertainment, Streamline no longer exists. In the mid 90s, there was the Columbia House video thing, and they attached it to anime. There was I don't know if Manga Entertainment was involved in it, but they released it through Orion, which
Oh
was a
God.
dead company for a long time, as is Columbia House, I
Mm.
believe. I mean, because the DVD market pretty much destroyed Columbia House, And then the 2001 Geneon dub, Geneon doesn't exist anymore. So it's like they're, yeah, you probably got your
Yep.
money out of it, this, but with everything else you were invested in that you thought was going to be as big as this, but
Hmm.
didn't, it kind of fell out. Like, all of the other
Yeah.
ones in that the commercial that I sent you, which were for Columbia House, like Demon City
Oh Jesus.
Shinjutsu. I don't think that made
No.
Akira money.
I mean,
Uh,
nothing made Akira money.
I don't think
Yeah.
what was it? Was it Genocyber or
Genesis.
Geist? MD Geist.
Yeah. At
I
least
can't remember which one, but yeah, those
no.
definitely didn't
Yeah,
get
but then again,
there.
it's like,
So
hey, these are decently made things, and here is one of the
yeah,
most important things ever made.
and here's decently made crap, and I don't think I would get in too much trouble saying that because like these are literally incredibly well animated things that have no
Yeah.
plot, no
Mm.
character. I mean, Demon City Shinjuku is a whole other thing. That's
Jesus.
Kawajiri, and Kawajiri was somebody who was able
Hmm.
to attach like
Hmm.
meaning and
Yeah. Too crap.
feeling to the ultra
Yeah.
violent,
Yeah.
ultra violence thing that came out in America, like
And
Ninja
then
Scroll and all
we
of
get
that.
stuff
But
like Armitage 3.
yeah, which
It's
it's
fine.
okay, it's okay. But then this didn't need a dub featuring Kiefer Sutherland and Jesse from
No.
Saved by the Bell.
But yeah, as I said, Akira it is anime. I think we're fair to say that. I mean, you know, we will doubtless at some point come and talk about Ghost in the Shell and the impact that left on anime. And there's obviously other films that we'll talk about at some point. We'll inevitably talk about Spirited Away, which I feel obviously had an importance in making anime a respectable medium in the West. But um, but yeah, this is our first anime anniversary episode. I'm sure we'll do more at some point. It's back to music next time, I think, Joe, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe we have music is Q. Are we
We are
not men?
Devo.
A.
We
We
are
are
Devo.
Devo. Is our next anniversary one. And eventually we are going to get back to a numbered one. We have done so many anniversary stuff, and we are recording uh,
Yep.
Evangelion December uh, in between our off times
Yep.
doing other things. So, we've had a packed schedule, even if it seems like we haven't
Yeah,
released a lot of
yeah.
episodes lately.
All will be revealed shortly. If you're following us on the Patreon, it will be revealed immediately because you lovely people are getting the full thing. So if you want to get a sneak peek of what we are up to, you can go to that Patreon, which is patreon.com/, the Thom and Joe show. Tom is spelt with a H. Uh, you can find us on social media at not so final prod on Twitter. We'll eventually make something for when Elon Musk eventually burns the site down. Watch this space. I've been Tom.
I've been Joe.
We're going to Ben. We're going to the Olympics. Joe.
Tom!
Joe.
Tom!
That's Mr.
Tom!
Tom to you.